What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Female Bodybuilding Girls in Gear. I'm your host, Tommy Stiles. With me, my good friend in Michigan, Shannon Seeley. Today, we are joined by Ifbb Women's Physique Pro, Nicole Lareau. Nicole, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. So we were kind of talking off air about how many weeks out you are from your pro debut, which is how many?
9 weeks out. I actually haven't officially announced it yet, just because there were some moving parts, but I am confident now. Yeah, 9 weeks out, Optimum Classic at the end of May,
That's in where?
Shreveport, Louisiana.
Perfect. Um, is that Is there any reason you picked that one, or is it just following where the timeline is?
It was really just the timeline, and I do live in Tennessee, so we were kind of trying to see if there was a show somewhat around here,
Yeah,
kind
yeah.
of. I am originally from Massachusetts. I considered the New York Pro. I considered Pittsburgh, but I've been having a lot of health issues.
Right.
And so while we were considering doing an earlier show at some point, we have decided to fall back and just stick with that initial plan. So yeah, May 25th, down in Shreveport. So
Awesome. Exciting. We'll dive into the health stuff here in a second. Just for a little bit of a catch up. You turned pro in 2022.
yes, December of 2022, at the national championships.
Yeah, amazing. And I believe you're fairly new to competing overall, aren't you? You haven't been doing it too many years.
Yeah, my pro debut will be my third show. So yeah.
Shannon shaking her head
um
at that.
no, so I mean I've been training for over a decade now. I had some injuries in the beginning, so but yeah, for a little over a decade now. And I did the CrossFit thing. I was a power lifter for a long time. But then, yeah, I switched to bodybuilding officially in, I guess, February of 2022. We did my first show in September and then went on to nationals. Um, and yeah, my pro debut would be my third show, which still I still don't really know what I'm doing. I'm just
Yeah.
I like training. I'm figuring it out as I go. So
Yeah, that's awesome though. Some people get that where they catch a one show, two show, and next thing you know, they're doing a pro debut. So I know Shannon had a different path. I'm on a different path, but you work with Nelson Jones,
yes.
Coach Nelson.
And yeah, I'm still with Nelson. He is retiring this year. So I will be, yeah. Which that has been announced and everything. So, I can talk about it. But yeah, I'm still with him for now though. We're just looking at this first show for now. But yeah, he's always been my coach since the beginning. Um, he's wonderful and he will be sorely, sorely, sorely missed by several people I know, including myself. So as of now, yes, I am with Nelson, but I do not know what the future holds.
Yeah. Well, that's the exciting part. You get to create the future, but first things first is the pro debut. So let's dive into this prep. I know you said off air you've already been prepping 21 weeks.
Yeah. Yes. So I have autoimmune issues, existing autoimmune issues. And because of that, my body I also have an incredibly high threshold for like volume training, pain management. Basically, I run myself into the ground, and we all do. But I've been known to overdo it. So because of that, and because of what happened my first prep, where we did struggle, I was planning on doing a longer prep. With me and my body, it'll probably never be shorter than 20 weeks, I would imagine. Because when I start doing like a lot of cardio, and my body just gets really eaten up, and I start like retaining a lot of water, overtraining, and on top of it, I have rheumatoid arthritis. I
Mhm.
was I was diagnosed with that in my early 20s. When I was a teenager, I had Graves' disease, which is a hyper overactive thyroid. And I actually ended up having to have my thyroid taken out. So I'm on all synthetic thyroid hormones as well. And I also, we are kind of in the middle of a new diagnosis as well. It's myositis, I believe. It's just another autoimmune condition that's marked by pain and muscle breakdown. Um, so that's always been going on, and I've suspected for a couple of years I did have this other, which now we know is likely myositis. We're still working through the diagnosis on that and all the blood work and everything that goes into that. But because of that, we always plan longer preps, and we decided this year to just kind of start. And we started in October, so the schedule wasn't even out yet. Then when the schedule came out in January, we were looking at some shows. We looked at the Optimum, and Nelson has done that show before with the Women's Physique Girl. He's won that show before, and we were kind of like, okay, we'll definitely do that, kind of nail it on the wall, and then let's just see how things shake out and see, what happens. Um, February hit, and it was rough, really, really rough. And I pretty much, I didn't train or do cardio for like almost a full month. Um, so so I've been in prep for a very long time, 21 weeks. I do still have 9 weeks to go, but it hasn't really been normal, and no prep is normal. So yeah, that's why I've been in prep for such a long time.
What challenges does your autoimmune conditions present for you in prep?
So honestly, like the thyroid stuff is kind of a blessing in disguise, to be honest,
Yeah.
because I don't ever have to worry about like downregulation of thyroid.
Right.
I'm on everything synthetic. We monitor it. I will say when I'm in prep, we tend to have to actually decrease my medication just because I am lighter, and you don't want like a thyroid storm or anything of that nature. Um, but so honestly, I would say that it's so funny. Me and my mom always joke, because that was a very difficult time in my life when I was getting diagnosed with that and dealing with that. And we always joke that it was so I could bodybuild later. So now it's like, oh, okay, it's just like a little treat. So that one, honestly, that's great. The rheumatoid arthritis, and now this myositis thing, my joints are just damaged. There's permanent damage that, will not ever come back or fix itself, I guess. I I cannot do like the stairs. I cannot ever like go on the bike. I have to do the elliptical for cardio and nothing else. And that can be sometimes difficult to get my heart rate into, the area that I want it to. Um, I have to be really, really careful with training. I do come from a powerlifting background, so my strength, especially when compared to some other, bodybuilder type style training, is pretty high, and I have a very difficult time backing off properly. And then what can happen is I'm much more susceptible to things like rhabdo, which is what happened this past prep and why I wasn't training and it wasn't really I couldn't even there's legitimately like 2 weeks of my life that I don't remember. I couldn't get out of bed. We didn't truly know what was going on at the time. I was retaining a ton of water, like 8 pounds of water. Um, and it was really just about pain management at that point. I require more sleep than the average person because of my autoimmune issues. That doesn't always happen in prep. And then I just get buried a lot quicker than someone who has, a fully functioning immune system, pretty much. If there's any sickness in the air, I get it. I've gotten it. I have had a sinus infection for like, I don't even know, for like basically since all of which I got COVID in December as well. That hit me really hard. So basically, it's just I get really fatigued. And again, everyone deals with that in prep. So like I'm not, I know, but it's a different type and different level of fatigue. I can feel the difference between wow, it's 11 o'clock. I haven't eaten yet today. I have no energy. This is terrible. This is prep. That's one thing. I can deal with that. But then there's this other level of, yeah, like legitimately cannot get out of bed. And not being able to train is like training's like the only thing that makes me feel better. So then when I also can't do that, it's just, it's kind of a little bit of a nightmare. But the biggest thing with the way it impacts prep and everything is really just, we have to be even more careful than usual, especially because a lot of the medications that I'm on are either liver or kidney toxic, which is another layer to everything. So
Just got a lot going on.
I know, I'm so
Yeah.
sorry.
No, it's great. I mean, I think you're definitely not the only person with autoimmune stuff. I have a client that has Graves, so it's actually, from a bodybuilding perspective, it is kind of a blessing in disguise in contest prep. And in the off season, I've noticed they can have flare ups and have to have an increase in their medication at certain points. But in prep, it was like, as a coach, you don't really have to worry about the thyroid slowing down because it's always too fast. So, but everybody has their own challenges. So, I always say there's a way, you find it, and it sounds like you do. So you carry a lot of muscle for someone who's only, going into her third show. I know you have 10 years of training, powerlifting background. So as far as training, are you someone who gets after it with like heavy weight? I know you said you could handle a lot of volume. How do you approach your training? Does Nelson do your training?
So for my first season, he did. Especially again, coming off of powerlifting background, I had good quads and no hamstrings. Because I'm a very quad dominant squatter, and deadlifting was never my best lift. I was a much better bencher and squatter. So I had no glutes, I had no hamstrings, and my shoulders were just not great. And when I first started working with Nelson, I wanted to do figure. I was not supposed to. I ended up jumping into women's physique a week and a half out of my first show. So I truly I wanted to do figure. I was hell bent on figure. But as I'm sure you guys both, I mean, figure is a very tough division with those teeny little waists, and I just don't have that. I was never gonna have that. But that's what I wanted to do. At the time I was super scared of like the femininity thing and everything like that, like losing my femininity. I was worried about it. I was worried about getting too big. Which is so silly now looking back. It's very clear that women's physique was always my home. And I'm very, I have no qualms or quarrels with like my femininity or anything like that. So that was kind of just sort of outside pressure that made me feel like I had to do figure. But we were really targeting shoulders, specifically thinking that I was going to do figure as well. So Nelson did all my training last year. We hammered shoulders. Glutes were always I don't like training glutes. I actually don't like training legs at all. And I think it was more of like a mind muscle connection thing and like a desire to do it thing. Now, his training worked great for me. I was really happy with my progress. But what ended up happening was once I came off the show, I had a lot of stuff going on in my life, and I just started to not like the gym as much for whatever reason. And I asked him back in like March if I could just have a week to just do whatever I wanted in the gym. And my next check-in after that, which literally was just a week later, he was like, something seems different. Let's kind of ride this out. Like, let's do it for a month. Just kind of do whatever you want for a month. And after the first month, we never stopped. We never went back to, I was making the amount of progress that I was making, just for whatever reason, just vastly increased when I started kind of doing my own thing and just doing what felt good at the time versus feeling like I had to do something. And I mean, it just, especially like my glutes and hamstrings, I found different ways. I hate barbell hip thrusts. I know, and like Shannon, like I'm sure Nelson loves them, as most people should and do. They're phenomenal. If someone asks me how to build their glutes, that's the first thing I say. I cannot stand them. I don't like doing them. I stopped doing them. And
It's
I
funny
think
you say that because I don't like him at all, and I never did until he had him in my program. And I go, damn it, I do not want to do. And I still take every couple of weeks. I'm like, nope, I got to do something else. I can't.
and I was doing it, I got up to, I had never barbell hip thrusted because all last year, or all my, 2002, 2022, I was using one of those like hip thrust machines.
Mm-hmm.
And he had found that out and was like, you got to do barbell. Okay. So I started doing barbell hip thrust in like January, like last January. And then by March, I mean, I was up to like 500 pounds, but I was like, I hate this. I don't like it. I'm not developing. Like, obviously, the reason I wasn't developing is because I hated doing it. I wasn't truly like feeling it the way I needed to feel it when I was doing the exercise, because the only thing I was thinking about was how much I didn't want to be doing it. Still a wonderful exercise, but like I hate it. So that was really the main difference, is just I fell back in love with what I do. And I stopped deadlifting and I stopped squatting as well, like barbell deadlifting and barbell squatting, which helped my waist. And that also helped my joints immensely, which was very difficult with the RA and everything. So yes, I lift definitely heavier, especially with the amount of volume that I do. Most people in my off-season workouts, most people look at them and they're like, that's insane. But I don't know. It's just what I've always done. It's what I've always been doing. But it's not uncommon for me to do like 10 plates per side on a leg press for like 40 reps and then do like 6 total sets. That's like what I would normally be doing in the off season. But yeah, I hate barbell hip thrusts.
Yeah, it's a lot of work just to set it up. I think that's what gets a lot of people, the plates and the bar and all that. Um, I mean, I think the proof is in the pudding. If you want dense muscle, how you train is a big catalyst to that. I think a lot of people have a misconception that maybe not on this channel, because we're pretty good about breaking down females and how they train, but females have to train very similar to males: hard, heavy, progressive, get strong over time. It's a lot of the same principles. So diving into the gear side of things, I know that was something we talked about off air. What are your thoughts on it? Did you have any experience with it before you got into bodybuilding? Is it all new to you?
So I started out in USAPL powerlifting, which is drug tested. And then after I got a couple meets under my belt, I did decide to dip my toe into gear for the first time. And this was it was right before COVID shutdown. So what I actually did was I think I took what was supposed to be Anavar, 20 milligrams for a couple weeks, and then all the gyms shut down and I stopped. I stopped everything. I wasn't, in prep anymore. I was, because for powerlifting, because, I couldn't go to the gym. Then I started up again in sometime in the summer. And again, I was doing 20 milligrams of Anavar going into a meet, USP. I switched to USPA at that point, which is not drug tested. So I will say that was all I had done previously, was 20 milligrams of Anavar. But I also, at a certain point, after my last powerlifting meet in December of 2020, it was 2020, sorry. I was prepping for another powerlifting meet that spring. And again, supposedly I was on Primo. It was not Primo. I don't know what it was. I had a coach at the time who was not good, and a little just sort of abusive in several ways. Not little. It was a bad situation. I was in a really bad situation, and it was one of those cases where someone was pretty much just like shooting something into my arm and telling me that like this was what it was and that everything was good. I ended up dropping out of that meet prep and not going back to powerlifting after that. And then my next experience with gear was when I started with Nelson and when we got into prep. And I will say that after that, the powerlifting situation and after my initial, I knew nothing about gear. You know, I knew absolutely nothing. I didn't have anyone that I felt like at the time, this coach was like who I thought I could trust. And that was it. And that was not the case. And I didn't ask the proper questions. So I also definitely, I have to take full responsibility for it ultimately because it's my body and what I was putting into it. But what ended up happening was right before I started working with Nelson, my hormones were a mess, probably because I had been like starting and stopping cycles, having no idea what I was truly taking. Still to this day, I don't know what I was taking. And I was also under an immense amount of stress. And my natural test level, I think it was like 7, I'm pretty sure. I was like perimenopausal. I hadn't gotten my period for like 10 months. So I went to an HRT clinic who at the time gave me I don't remember the dose. I could go back and look, but like they put me on a really high dose of testosterone and progesterone. And then what ended up happening was I kind of flip-flopped. Then my test went through the roof. My estrogen also went through the roof. And it was horrible. And I ended up getting my blood taken again. And I went back to that clinic and I was like, what did you, they refunded me everything and basically just said, sorry. And that was it. That was how it went. Which I was grateful that they refunded me, I guess, but I'm like, what the hell do I do now? So now it was October of 2021. And I went down to 4 days a week training and wasn't really doing cardio. And I just kind of had to ride it out.
How were you feeling when you were taking, like, how were you feeling on top of this? Like physically with your training? Like, how did you feel?
Like shit. Excuse my language. Nothing was like, I looked good, but I felt like garbage. Like it was mostly a mental health thing, honestly. My body kind of always hurts. So it wasn't anything like, and I was responding still, which was kind of what messed with me more than anything, because I was like, why do I still I was pretty happy with how I looked. But I was like crazy and I knew I was crazy and I knew something was off. And that's why I got my blood taken again. Cause I was like, this is not right. Obviously in hindsight, once things flip-flopped and my test levels were super high and everything was great, I was like lifting more, honestly, but I was just absolutely miserable. And then when I also had to face the fact of like, I still didn't have my period. And during that time, I also had gotten off hormonal birth control though, because I kind of figured, well, I have all these issues with these hormonal issues going on. I had been on the pill for, since I was like 12 years old. And I knew that I wanted to start bodybuilding at this point, and I knew that I wanted to come off birth control to have the best chance of being successful. And that's a kind of a whole other, birth control is kind of a whole other thing. But I had come off birth control too, so there was just like a lot going on. I just knew that something was wrong, but I was also going through a lot of stress in my personal life at that time too. So I couldn't ever really differentiate what was truly happening. I just knew that something was very, very, very wrong. So I ended up, I went down to 4 days a week training. It was way more difficult mentally than anything because my body still felt okay. But I was always on edge. I was always just, I did. Once I stopped taking the test and got away from the HRT clinic and everything, I did start like retaining a lot of water, gaining a lot of weight, whatever. And by the time I started working with Nelson, you could see that I had muscle, but I was very watery. I was very soft. you could just kind of tell that there was like something had been going on, I guess is the best way to put it. And I didn't look or feel like I was even like in shape even in the slightest anymore by the time I started working with Nelson. And then we did not touch gear, until we started a prep. So my only experiences with gear prior to coming on with Nelson were just, I would say, like irresponsible. And I just had, no, I'm thankful that the long-term impacts, like, hopefully nothing that I've noticed, I haven't noticed any long-term impacts from it, which is good, but who knows later, I don't know. Like, obviously I don't have a crystal ball, but that's where I came from. And so when I was looking at coaches, I was very, very, very careful, but also very nervous. But everything, Nelson is very, I had asked him on the front end, like, how do you feel about gear, pretty much? And I liked his answer. And it's definitely like a necessary thing if you're trying to be on certain levels, but it can be very quickly abused. So
I'm going to ask both of you this because you're both Ifbb women's physique pros, which is, a high level of muscularity. What do you think the right questions are to ask a coach when you're starting out? Because I know Shannon and I started bodybuilding 10 years ago when there wasn't nearly as much information or people weren't talking about things. And even for me as a male, like, I didn't ask any questions. I just had a guy tell me to do this and I was like, cool, whatever. So luckily I've always had good guidance and never got sent down any bad paths. But what do you guys think good questions are to ask?
Shannon, you can start. I'm thinking.
Well, everyone kind of knows my background and how I said, like, I mean, I got into it with wrong compounds, had the whole opposite end where I put on a shit ton of fat from the compounds I was taking. I think the biggest thing is when you are ready to delve into these compounds, the first, like, I will say, when you first start, you shouldn't really be running more than one compound, especially one androgenic compound at a time, because you don't know, especially for females. Like, most females just start with Anavar. You do Anavar for your first cycle, come off of it, see how you go. But if you start with more than one compound, that would be the first question: is why do you need more than one compound? The biggest question I would say is if your coach is giving you compounds and they haven't seen your blood work. That's the biggest thing. That's a big red flag. If your coach is, you're going into a prep and your coach doesn't ask for blood work and they give you this gear protocol, that is a huge red flag. They can potentially kill you from giving you this protocol and not looking at your blood work. So those are the biggest things I usually ask people, or I usually want people to understand, is usually one compound when you're first starting out. And number two is if you don't get that blood work started first, then you're screwed. I mean, other than that, and we've had a couple people on where we all have different adverse reactions to it. So everyone's going to respond a little bit differently based on, their hormone levels. So it's important to ask questions. Like, you should never be afraid to ask questions to your coach. Like, I think I've told everyone, like, I'm super, like, I will never take any test, ethynate, acetate, cypionate, for my preps. I'm just anti-test for me. I'm Italian, so my virilization will go insane from me taking anything test. So it's going to depend on the individual, but it is important to ask questions like, okay, you gave me this. Why are you giving me this as well? Or, hey, you just upped my dose. Why are we upping it? So some stuff, and especially like for someone like you who's 9 weeks out, or if you've already been prepping for so long, your mental state is not 100%. Your cognitive state is going down, and it does. We talked about how you almost become really dumb when you're about 4 weeks out. No offense, but you do. Just
oh
because,
no, I'm dumb. You're fine.
So it's really important that you kind of address these questions before your prep gets started, because if your coach adjusts your protocol when you are less than 10 weeks out, you really don't have any room to argue, or you have to understand what you're getting into beforehand. I think T and I, our last podcast was like, you can't reverse stuff that you've already started when you're already deep into a prep, doing 10 or 12 weeks of a cycle, and then decide, hey, I don't like what this is doing to me. So I'll stop there because I'll rant on. But yeah, that's my biggest thing would just be like the blood work. Why, if you're getting more introduced to different compounds you're not used to, the reasoning. It's okay to ask questions and then do your own research.
Yeah, I mean, you pretty much covered it. The only other thing I was going to add, you did actually end up saying, was changing of dosages. Like, you should always be on the lowest effective dose. If you are still seeing progress on a dose, why are you changing it? I have never been on more than 20 milligrams of Anavar. Still to this day, we have not changed that. I'm also, this prep, I'm on far less. This is the other thing. Nothing is as good as like hard training and having the muscle tissue. So that's the other thing, is like, I would even caution you may not need gear at all, like your first season, depending on like your level or what you're doing. It's not something that it's not an automatic. It's when you and your physique and your body are ready for it. You, like, in my opinion, and I know that not everybody agrees with this, but like in my opinion, like, you should be training to truly like your full potential prior to ever adding in gear at all. And you certainly shouldn't be increasing gear or anything of that nature. But other than that, I mean, you pretty much, you covered it. That's just, don't be afraid. The other thing is like, as a female, and I know that a lot of us have male coaches, it can be kind of awkward or uncomfortable to ask certain questions in terms of, hey, what is this going to do to me below the belt? What is this? You know what I mean? Like, hey, I have facial hair. Like, you don't always want to ask a guy those questions, which I fully understand. So if that is your situation, like, either get comfortable with it, or you have to have someone that you can ask. You cannot just stick your head in the sand. Truly,
Yeah.
you really truly can't. But at the end of the day, if you are not comfortable, even though yes, it's uncomfortable, but if you truly can't get yourself to ask your coach these questions, that can't be your coach. And I don't mean to sound harsh when I say that, but like, you have to be able to talk about everything with your coach, including side effects, including like GI stuff. Even that's kind of, again, sorry, but you have to be comfortable with your coach. And if you're not, it's nothing against them, it's nothing against you. You guys cannot work together because it's not healthy. So
Yeah, especially when it comes to females. Like, I mean, the hormone health with your menstrual cycles, bowel movements, all that stuff. Like, it is really, I mean, like, I just, I told everyone I just got diagnosed with ulcerative colitis. I mean, literally, like, I had to give updates to Nelson about my poop schedule for weeks. You know what I mean? It's something that you have to do though, no, 100%. And, now do you feel too, because I mean, you really started your prep, you didn't do like a first, like a cycle free prep. Like, when you started competing, you went right into gear, correct? So, do you, with your first prep to now, I mean, obviously your gear protocols probably changed and increased and stuff. How have you felt about that? Just knowing that, like, the higher ranks up you get, it's kind of like the doses do kind of increase, or you might have to add more. I mean, how do you feel? Because you have an amazing physique, but you're only 3 shows in. So that's the other thing too, is like, you don't have the experience with the protocols as much. So how are you been feeling kind of just with that?
So, for 100% transparency, I'm actually on far less gear than I was my last prep. So right now I'm running 20 milligrams of Anavar. We added in 20 milligrams of Nolva 2 weeks ago. My first prep, I started Nolva in May and didn't compete until September and December. So I was on Nolva for a very long time last prep. We also added in Winstrol and Proviron sometime in the summer. But this prep, 20 milligrams of Anavar, we did just add in the Nolva much later. I run Pharma GH in prep. Off season, I wasn't running any GH. And then we're cycling Clen. So that's all I'm on right now.
Okay.
Even my Clen dosage is lower. That, like, I've been on 60 micrograms, whereas for my first prep, we were cycling with like 60 and 80. And right now we're kind of cycling like off 40, 60. I've hit 80, but never for longer than 9 days at a time. And yeah, with Clen, we do 40 for 9 days, technically 60 for 9 days, 80 for 9 days, then off. But that's kind of changed. Like I said, it's been less this prep. I did utilize the only gear I was on in the off season was 25 milligrams of Primo a week, and that was it as well. So I'm kind of, I guess, a unique case in that my gear usage has actually gone down.
Mm-hmm.
So that being said, I don't quite, I don't know yet.
Yeah.
I don't know what's gonna happen. I will say that we were considering carrying Primo into prep, but I started to not like some of the side effects I was getting. Specifically the X-rated below the belt. Like I didn't like my clit growth. Like I was not, I felt like it was extreme. But it was also like it was fine one day and then the next day I was like, wait. And then we stopped and everything went back down. So that's
Okay.
the other thing I want to say. That is lucky. That will not always happen. And two, like the second you see something that you don't like, say something to your coach, and because you can't necessarily just stop. We went down to 12.5 and then came off. So that's the other thing I want to say is like that again, I think that was a unique case in which I felt like, and I also I was being dramatic about it because I pay very close attention to my body, especially if I'm running gear. Like I'm crazy. Because I someone needs to be watching it. And if you ignore it and stick your head in the sand, like you will get to a point where one day you'll wake up and say, oh, I don't like this, but now you're too far in and it may not, probably won't reverse, definitely not fully. So I was very proactive when the minute I was like, I don't know about this. And then, yes, I was very, very, very fortunate that I'm, fine now. I don't notice any difference or change from previous. So but that was honestly luck. And now I don't know kind of moving forward, like what if I'll use Primo. I don't know. I don't know if I'll be comfortable using it again. These are all questions that, I have to think about, especially moving forward and going to be changing coaches eventually. Something I will say is that I'm 30. I started bodybuilding. I was, I guess, 27, 28. Like when you're younger, if you start younger, I think it's a little difficult to see sort of the future in terms of like what you're going to be doing. But because I was a little older, I'm very well aware that like this is just a time period of my life.
Mm-hmm.
And what I do today, I'm going to have to live with every single day for the rest of my life. So there are certain things that I will not do. If the division had been moving in a direction that I was very nervous about, I'm very interested to see as shows kick up this year what's being rewarded, because I will not do things in order to be successful in the division. Like I won't do that to myself.
Yeah.
There are certain things that I just won't do. There are certain compounds I just won't take. I would never, same with you, like the short time period that I did use tests like based off of that HRT clinic, I'll never do it again. Whether it's just from trauma for that or I'm Italian too. I'm a like I don't know. I have to be very careful. But yeah, there are certain things I will never take, and there are certain things that if they don't like my look or my physique and they want something way more extreme, there are things I won't do, and that is what it is. Because I am, I'm a person. I'm a bodybuilder, but I'm a person.
Yeah.
And people,
1,000%. And I think it's so important. And I've preached this all the time, T hears all the time. Like each individual athlete has to set their boundaries of what they can and can't. And I always go in, even when I'm with a new coach, like I will not take these gear. Either a good coach will respect that, number one, and number two, like most very knowledgeable coaches, no problem. I can get you around that, like not a problem. But like I love how you just said, like I'm the same way. Like I'm trying to see how they're going to bring this division up, because it's like if it's going to be bigger and harder, am I willing to push my physique to that level? No, because I still might want to have another kid. I don't know. So it's one of those things. It's just like I preach this all the time, like especially for the younger listeners. Yes, it's great to have that mentality, like whatever it takes, but you're only 20 or you're only 18, you're only 20, you're only 25. You don't know if you want kids. You don't know where the direction of your life is going. So you have to be proactive in knowing that now, where that way you're still have for, you're still fertile if you want to have kids. You still have your hair when you're 30 or 40 years old. You still are able to lift without having to wear 80 million belts and layers to protect your joints. It's really, really important. And I'm so glad you say that, because I always just want the younger generation coming in and be like, yeah, we look great. But like, it's, there's a lot of like hit or misses that we've had to experience. And we're just trying to invoke this knowledge onto you guys so you don't make the same mistakes. So.
Absolutely. I mean, oh my gosh, I hated, like literally hated children until I was like 28 years old. So I'm like, so if I was, when I was a kid, when I was young like that, like I had no idea what, what I would have wanted or and you just don't, like you think but you just don't know. And you have to be, especially as a female. I know it sucks because I feel like guys can more often just be like, oh, whatever, like we'll figure it out, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
But as a you have to think about those things, and you have to remember that at the end of the day, the judges are not the one looking in the mirror. You're the one looking in the mirror. And if you don't like what you're seeing looking back at you physically or, or mentally, whatever, like you need to address that, because you are the one putting your head down on the pillow every night. It's not a judge. It's not any of these judges, and nothing against them, but they're judging us one look, 1 minute, 1 day. You have to live with yourself every single day. So do not literally change everything about yourself for that like 30 seconds on stage. And I know that's easier said than done. I get it, but yeah, it's a shame to see some of what I've seen. So I hope that things like this, I'm really glad you guys do this, and hopefully that'll help things.
No, with what you've done so far, and like obviously like you're starting to make a name for yourself in the sport. You were on the bodybuilding channel shout out page for Instagram. People are starting to notice you. You're the up and coming one to watch for this pro debut. How has it been, like, obviously, like we deal with the trolls and the social media stigma. How has that been for you with kind of, are you getting a lot of, I mean, obviously when we're in prep, we probably get the worst of it because that's the best we look. So how do you deal with that? How has that been going for you?
So what's funny is like what ended up happening was when I was in prep the last time, my account was like growing a ton. I was getting so much engagement. Yeah, there was some negative, there was some trolls, there was, but basically like as soon as I put some weight on post show, not only did like my growth and everything stagnate, I lost a ton, like hundreds of like in droves. And I was still posting, and then it made me not want to post anymore. So then you lose even more, everything like that. And it took me several months to kind of like come to terms with like, okay, it's just because you're lean, it's exciting, but that's not my worth. Like, not, it still sucks, but like my worth is not wrapped up in that. Like it's truly not. It hurt, but I was like, okay. So I got over it. I learned how to live with it. I understood like, okay, people want you and they're interested in you when you look a certain way, but they don't care about what you have to look like and what you have to do to get there. Okay. I don't care. Is what it is. I have, my life, my peace, my family, my friends, like that's fine. And then it's funny, literally as soon as I get like a vein pops out, it's like I'm growing like 10% like every day. And I'm like, oh, this could easily mess with you. But that being said, like this year, much more than last year, is like all like really supportive. I haven't seen the same level. There are some nasty comments. There are some nasty message requests. There are some nasty people out there, as there always will be. But I immediately report, block, done. Like I don't care. I don't even want it on my page. Generally speaking, though, there's been a lot more. It feels like an out of body experience. Like, yeah, I was on the female bodybuilding page. That was crazy. They were speculating about what I was like, I'm not hiding what show I'm doing. I just didn't know for sure. I was thinking, but it's just it's funny to me because it doesn't. I don't take myself that seriously. I take like training and what I do very seriously, but me as a person, like I'm like weird. I'm a goofball. I don't know. And I know nothing about, honestly, like I'm still so new to this sport and this just the whole, just everything, I also stay very, very insulated from it. I don't have like a lot of close bodybuilding friends. I've never been to a bodybuilding show outside of my own. Like I don't, I and I don't say that because like I don't care or respect the sport. Not at all. That's not the case at all. It's just I like to, sit at home and smoke weed and watch The Sopranos. I don't necessarily like want to go out every weekend and, I'm just a homebody. But I think that because of that, and because like I don't put myself out there a lot, yeah, there is some interest of like who the heck is this, and like where did she come from, and what's she doing, which I guess to a degree is kind of cool. And it's very flattering, it's very humbling. But I'm just me. I just, I do what I do. And if people like that and, want to engage with me on that and like my social media and stuff, like that's
Yeah.
totally cool. And if they don't, that's also okay. But I,
So
I
we're
will
gonna
say,
do we're gonna do a spin-off podcast show. It's gonna be the Nicole and Shannon show. We're just gonna sit on the couch and smoke weed and just watch, and that's all we're gonna do. We're just talk about bodybuilding and super stoned. All right. That'll be
I
what
would
we do. Going back to the social media thing, I do, and I always forget to mention this, and I'm glad that you mentioned this with the like how you just block and delete people. This is for females, especially. There is a thing, just so females know this, on social media and your Instagram. I don't know if Facebook has the same option. There are keywords that you can block out. So if someone puts a keyword in, it won't actually post on they can't actually put that comment. So they're trying to be like, oh, you look like a man. Well, if I have man canceled out of my Instagram account, they won't actually be allowed. Instagram won't allow them to. The same way with messages. Like if I think I have like a bunch of words highlighted, like disgusting man, like pictures, because I don't want dick pics, like all that stuff I have. So if they're not following me or they're not following protocol, Instagram will not even allow me to see that message even in the request. So I'm sure you know about that feature, but just so people, if you're listening that you don't know, Instagram does have that feature where you can literally filter out words and messages and comments on your actual account so people don't have to, that you don't even have to see that stuff. Because I know for someone like you who's 9 weeks out in prep, you don't want to see that, and it's going to mess with your head mentally. Like it makes that cortisol just elevate tremendously.
that's the other thing I was going to say is like, even like I can sit here. Do I truly care what user 247? No. However, to your point, it impacts you. Period. Especially as a female, especially like it's going to impact, and that doesn't make you weak. That doesn't, to block people, to people like, oh, you're so bothered. Yeah, I am. Okay, your point. Like, I don't know. Like you would never walk up to me in person and say that. So don't comment it. And if you're going to, yeah, it does bother me, and I'm going to make sure I don't see it. And I don't think that that's weakness, and I don't think that that's a negative thing at all. I think it's protecting your peace. So yeah, and I know that TikTok also does that. Those are really the only two social media platforms that I use, but they are, and it works. Like filtering out comments like that, like it will save you. Just do it. It doesn't make you weak. It doesn't make you like. The other thing is like sometimes I feel like self-important where I'm like, why would people go out of their way to say something to me? Like whatever, blah blah. But then it'll happen, and I'm like, okay, it's okay to admit that yes, sometimes you're stuff gets on the wrong side of Instagram, and there are people that will comment and are bothered by it. Like it's okay. It doesn't make you conceited to be like, I have to filter my comments. That's fine.
Well, I think the more the bodybuilding grows and is seen more from different eyes and lenses, the average bodybuilding fan knows zero about bodybuilding. They haven't actually ever followed a diet for a week. They have never trained for 3 months straight. Most people are just, they're not even fans. They're just like infatuates of what's happening in front of their eyes. So they don't know the process. They don't know that bodybuilding at its core is really boring. There's not a lot to it. You train hard consistently over time. You eat the same meals over and over and over again. You do some cardio, you drink some water, and you sleep. If you take drugs, you take drugs, and if you don't, you don't. It's really all it is. So I think a lot of people just, that's why, prep people get a lot more engagement, because there's more happening visually, there's more stimulation. Whereas like anybody's off-season physique, mine, Shannon, you, it's not all that eye-grabbing because it's just large and fluffy, and maybe what we can do in the gym is better, but it doesn't have that visual grab that like draws people in. And And then the more people that post, we're so like, we almost get like desensitized to like what a good physique is or what a bad physique is, because we see so many every day if we just spend time on our phones. So I just think it's important for anybody, male or female, to just to keep that in perspective. Like, same thing. I've had comments where, people make comments about steroids or that I might have small balls or something like that. And it's like, to this day, no one has ever walked up to me in person and said anything derogatory ever in my life. And I've been across the world, I've been all over this country. Not one time has someone come up to me and had anything negative to say. So it's just important to remember that the person on the other side of the keyboard that wants to type something negative is absolutely miserable in their own skin. And if you can remind yourself of that, you're going to be all right. It does get annoying. I'm sure it's even more annoying as a female. But I think it's with age and maturity. And if you understand social media as you zoom out from it and realize like, it's not that big a deal. I think I said that to somebody the other day. I was like, Instagram isn't that serious. Like life will go on.
It's not real life. Like, it's the internet. People can be whoever they want and say whatever they want. It does not matter. And I know that in a sport like this, where it is so wrapped up in each other, and to truly like make money from bodybuilding for most people, it's gonna be like through social media. I get that, and I know that it matters, but it's not real. Anybody can be anyone and say anything. And it's so funny because, to your point, like, I don't know why these people they're always so interested in what's going on like under your pants, males and females. And it's just like, I don't know what the obsession is. I really don't. It's so crazy to me. But to your point, these are people that truly like are self-loathing and see someone doing something that they know they could never do, and they're just going to attack it in whatever way they can. So
yeah. Shannon, you got anything else?
No, I'm excited. This is good. We covered everything I needed to cover. And
I hope that I know that I go off on tangents, especially these days, and like I'm so nervous right now because I am a little brain dead. I hope I am usually more articulate than this.
No, it was solid.
Yeah.
I think it went well. There's a lot of good talking points that I think will help the audience as far as females that are either in the sport or I think, and I can say this just for like males on the extreme end of bodybuilding, because I've been in it 10 years. Once you start to realize that there are other people out there who like, you're not alone. You experience a lot of the same things, a lot of the same sacrifices, because if being a champion bodybuilder and climbing the ranks is your goal, it can be very lonely over the years, because you're going to start to segregate yourself more and more and more. And all the little things that you do, all the quirks, all the little routine habits that you develop are just going to isolate you so much from like the 99%, that it is nice to know that there's other people that, go through the same things and the same thought processes and the same like, struggles or triumphs and tribulations. So I think that's the whole point of the podcast, is just to put it out there and let people know that they're not alone if they're experiencing that.
Yeah,
For
absolutely.
sure. And it's also like, we are the ones that can be like, oh wait, we got beef in our meal today instead of chicken. It's the little wins like that where no normal person to understand that, but when you're like, hey, coach gave me 2 cups of rice instead of 1. It's
and I'm like, oh, so sick, and everyone else is like. I always try to like keep an eye to my DMs as well. I will genuinely talk to anyone. Like, I really will. So to your point, where if like anybody ever feels alone or anything like that, I do answer DMs. I look at them, I look through them. And I'm always here for anybody that feels like they may not have anyone. You have someone, and it's me. So
like a proactive conversation, you guys. That doesn't mean that she wants dick pics. Like
yes, to be clear. Nothing gross, please. And no, I'm not. I have a boyfriend. So
Awesome. Well, we'll keep an eye close on your pro debut, 9 weeks out. Is it just a one and done, or are you going to keep going from there?
That will depend. I think that It'll depend on what happens with the coaching situation. Because the other thing, with a new coach, it's going to need to learn my body. I would be much more willing to do another show. As of now, that's the only one I definitely have on the schedule. But I have always said that I'm open to doing more shows this year. But especially just with everything going on, we're kind of like, let's just get to the first one and then see what happens.
One at a time. I like it. So for Nicole Lareau, Shannon Seeley, I'm Tommy Stiles. This has been Female Bodybuilding Girls in Gear. Till next time, we're out of here.